Right in my own? Maybe not. You can hear me. Awesome. All right. Well, hey, it is May. We're towards the end of a school year, and it's about time, right? There we go. I hear it now. I hear it now. No more school. How many of you have already taken your exams? You're done already. Some of you. Awesome. Okay. Some of you are done. Let me ask you this: how many seniors do we have here tonight that are getting ready to be graduating? Come on. Nice. There we go. Come on, Piper. Yeah. Hey, that's pretty big, pretty significant. Real significant, definitely, especially for our seniors getting ready to step out. Part of the reason getting a chance to speak tonight, some of you may not know this, but this upcoming Sunday, your youth pastor, Justin Donahue, is going to be preaching this on this coming Sunday. And so really excited about that. Yes. And so here's part of the reason why he's getting to do that, because it's Deployment Sunday. We're getting a chance to recognize our seniors that are stepping out, and some of you guys may be staying local, some of you may be going off other places, but it's such a significant deployment kind of what God has for you that we're excited to get a chance to recognize that. And so with Justin getting to speak, looking forward to that. So hopefully maybe some of you would even come out, either one of the 9 or 11 o'clock services, either campus, get a chance to not only support him, but support some of our seniors, as well as we get a chance to recognize some of them. So really looking forward to that, and it gave it a reason for me to get to hang out with you guys tonight and talk a little bit. So we're in this series called Wrong, Right, and really it's this look into injustice. And when you guys think a little bit about injustice type situations in our world, what do you guys think of? Or can you think of some examples of certain situations or things that you look at and you go, that's really unjust? You think of some scenarios or different things you see? I try to do a little bit of back and forth a little bit, so this is kind of where you talk. Human trafficking. All right, human trafficking. If you guys, so that's a real thing. That's people that are often maybe kidnapped or and sold to other countries for slavery or other really horrific acts. Crazy that stuff actually, believe it or not, happens around here. It's one of those things we may not see as prevalent, but yes, so those sort of things, it's quite injustice. So for someone to be taken, kidnapped, and then sold for other purposes, that's absolutely. What are some other things? Okay, so getting injustice would be you did not do something, you get blamed for the wrong thing, all right? Police brutality. Police brutality, okay. All right. All right, racism. Yeah, so a lot of injustice type things. So we see a lot of this stuff all around us, and I think many times it's easy for us to kind of go, well, that's out there, that's them, that's happening somewhere else. But the truth is, I think for many of us, we often also feel like maybe sometimes that happens to us. All right, so just kind of curious, how many of you would say you have someone in your family at some point in time who has just wronged you? Just wronged, yeah? Some hands? All right, how many of you would say that's like a sibling? Is that a brother? Yeah, the hands went up, yeah. Yeah, all right, so just absolutely wronged you. So a little bit of my story. I have a brother who's about 7.5 years older than me, and so that meant for many years, and so my parents separated, divorced when I was like 3.5, and so it was pretty much my brother and I, and now with, I'm like 3.5, he's like 10.5, and I didn't stand much of a chance. Like it was just, there were many, many moments like when mom left or was outside or something, I was nervous because I think he just didn't like me or something like that. I remember a day where he took the pillow and just put it over my head and was just like we're fighting and he's just holding the pillow over and I'm screaming and crying. I'll never forget my mom screaming through the window, "I'm gonna get you when I get in there," and I'm scared as all get out. And my brother would come and grab me often. And again, I didn't deserve this. I didn't do anything wrong. At least that's what was in my head. But he would grab my ear all the time and just hold my ear, pull me around by my ear. And I felt so bullied by my brother. And if you actually look today, one of my earlobes is this one. One of my earlobes is bigger than the other one. You're looking, Jason. It's true. You see it. Yeah, that stuff happens. I can't make that stuff up. That's all because of my brother. I have to live with that today. because of some of those things. My daughter Eliana, she's like, "What?" Yeah, I know you never wanted to bring it up, and I waited till tonight to do it. Um, it's, come on, it's about to get the good stuff. Um, but but we think of a lot of different situations, and maybe for you, and we kind of make light of some of those things, but maybe there's been some injustice that's actually happened to you, or someone's really wronged you. And I think for many of us, often, especially really wherever we are, a place like tonight inside of a church, I think certainly when you're at home and you're wherever you are, I think there's a lie that we often believe, and often this lie is, I'm the only one, I'm alone. This there's no way anyone feels what I feel, has experienced what I have felt, and so tonight, kind of want to look at the story of someone who I would say had a pretty raw deal, but we're going to see something kind of cool that God does and works through it. And it's through the story in the life of a guy named Joseph. Have you guys ever heard the story of Joseph? So some of you may know of Joseph, and you hear of Joseph and his brothers, okay? Sometimes, all right? His brother, but there's often, sometimes he had this really fancy coat, robe, yeah, so the coat of many colors. So often kind of, if you see like Jesus books or something like that, Joseph's young man standing there with this pretty rainbow robe on or something like that. And so that's kind of often we think about, but we don't always connect all the things that really sometimes took place with Joseph. So I'm excited tonight. What I'm going to do is spend a little time. I don't think all the scripture is going to be up here, so you're just going to have to hang with me a little bit. We're going to talk through a little bit of the story of Joseph, and hopefully we'll land it on hopefully a couple things that will be helpful to you for where you are. But yeah, so when we think of the life of Joseph, what are some things that stand out to you? Some of you are familiar a little bit with the story of Joseph. What might be some like big picture things that took place? Go ahead. Okay, so some evil things get to kind of happen to him. Yep. All right, so Joseph, some betrayal type things. Oh, he was a favorite. Okay. Okay, so some good things end up happening to him. Good. All right, y'all are giving it all away. All right, so let me quit asking questions. We'll get there. So there's some things here that stand in this moment for Joseph. So we're going to take a few moments to look at this, and it's in the book of Genesis. And if you wanted to, I would encourage you guys, maybe this is a place for some of you that are like, I'm interested in starting to read the Bible a little bit. Maybe tonight, maybe sometime this week, Genesis chapter 30 is the story of Joseph. You kind of read that. It's several chapters, but it's quite an interesting read to kind of see what happens to him, because I'm going to kind of do a condensed version of this. But in Genesis 30, we get an idea of a little bit of his backstory. So his mom is Rachel, his dad is Joseph, and pretty interesting. Rachel, she does not have kids until much later in life, and now Joseph is one of several kids. So there are 11 brothers, and he's one of the brothers. He's one of the youngest ones. He's about 17 years old at this time, so you can kind of relate a little bit to his story. But we read about this in Genesis 37, verses 3 through 4. It talks about how Joseph, Joseph's dad, talks a little bit about how he saw his son, this specific son, Joseph, in the midst of all of the sons they had. In verse 3, it says this of Genesis 37, now Israel, that was Jacob, that was another name for Jacob, the dad, loved Joseph more than any other sons because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a robe of many colors. But when his brothers saw their father loved him more than all the other brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceful to him. So, so you kind of get this. One of you brought up the idea that there's kind of this favoritism. Jason back there mentioned this idea that what was happening, part of how the father was actually seeing one of the sons really created quite a rift among the brothers. I don't know where you are, maybe some of you in your family, sometimes, often I think we can feel that sometimes, especially if we have many kids in our families. We can feel like maybe mom or dad or grandma or someone tends to kind of lean certain directions. And that can definitely create a lot of different tension that we feel towards, in this case, Joseph's brothers are going to take it out really on him, not on dad. They're mad at him. So now you kind of see this this idea of Joseph's receiving all of this kind of this affection from this dad. And so in the midst of all this, Joseph has a dream. And I'm interested. I love this idea that Joseph has this dream. It's a very interesting kind of dream that ultimately this vision that he communicates to his brothers. He's so excited. Hey, brothers, I can't wait to tell you this dream. And here's essentially the message of the dream. One day, you guys are not going to believe this. You're going to love it. You're going to love this. But one day, you are all going to bow down to me. Like, how do you think that made them, like, do you think that was like warm fuzzies? Like, man, that's awesome. Let's go get a coffee and talk about that. No, that was like, are you kidding me? Like, we're watching all this with Dad, and now you're coming out and you're going to tell me that, that one day you just had this dream and these things are going to happen. Well, it's very interesting. God was actually in this moment placing something that would eventually come true in Joseph's life. And I think it's good for many of us in the room tonight. I believe, especially, I think all of us feel this to some degree, but especially those of us who are followers of Jesus. I believe there's this thing that he kind of does in our hearts, in our lives, where he gives us a desire and a vision for something more than ourselves, for something that is significant, something that's big. I'll never forget being in college, and some friends of ours, we had hiked up onto this area outside of Clemson where there's Whitewater Falls. Is this area up in kind of the Walhalla area of that state and of the state. And I remember standing up there, and we were just like looking out over. You could just see so much of the area, like looking out over the mountains and stuff. And I'll never forget sitting there, and we're just talking through. We're just kind of evaluating our lives. Like, God, what do you think God's going to do one day in our life? And we didn't know. We just kind of, like, there was certainly, I didn't look at him and go, I think one day you're going to bow down to me. Didn't have that. But I had this feeling of like, God, I feel like he's going to do something significant, and I'm struggling. It's like, I think it's significant, but I don't necessarily think it means like a lot of people are going to know me, but I just feel like it's going to be significant, and I'm just trying to wrestle through all those things. And I'll be honest, in that moment, as I was feeling some of those things, and I'm kind of curious if Joseph was feeling some of these things, I'm kind of curious maybe you feel some of these things in moments where you're going, I feel like it's big, and I'm curious if it's going to happen like right now. Is that happening right now? And how quick can I get to that big thing, or that thing that God's calling me to, that thing that's out there? And I think we're going to learn some things through Joseph's story, not always how God plays out things, but I think how often he does work in and through our stories. And so he shares this dream with the brothers, and they are not excited at all. In fact, now we fast forward a little bit in Genesis 37:18, and the brothers are off a little bit, and they see little brother Joseph coming. And this is verse 18. It says, they saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. So this has gotten serious. Like, this has moved from dislike to you're a pest, and we're frustrated at you too. Like, they're actually, the whole group of brothers has decided it's better if we just take his life. He said, and they say to each other, come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams. So already there's these brothers that have a plan to see these dreams thwarted. And I'm sure for many of you, there are people in our life. There's probably some folks that are maybe in your circles or around your circles, that God kind of placed dream that he's put there in you. I'm kind of curious how many of them are helping fan that, or in many cases like this are kind of squelching or trying to kill the dream. But in this case, they're actually trying to kill him, but they're fearful of this dream. They're fearful of the dream. They're fearful of him. But fortunately, in the midst of this, there's actually two brothers, Reuben and Judah, who are like the two that kind of speak up. There's something that kind of moves in them that just, it's not overly heroic, okay? It's not like, we haven't hit Avengers status here, but they at least just step up and go, hey guys, like maybe there's another way. Like let's not see that happen. And they end up throwing him into a pit. And so, I just to note, just no matter how like annoying your siblings are, like these are bad ideas. Like these are all bad. We're going to put these in the camp of bad ideas because instead they throw him into a pit and then they pull him out and then they decide to sell him into slavery. And so they sell the brother, and so in their minds Joseph is gone. All right. So from this point forward, in their minds, brother is gone. If you read on, you'll hear their story of how they go back to their dad and just create this whole crafting lie. They even do some stuff to the robe to make it look like an animal did get him. Well, Joseph is sold into slavery. And here, of any of circumstances that he could have had, he ends up being sold to a man named Potiphar. And being sold into slavery is a terrible fate. But of all the people that Joseph could have been sold to, of all the circumstances, of all the situations that he could have been sold to, he is sold to Potiphar. And it's interesting, kind of in the midst of all these kind of unjust moments, for the moment of his interaction with his brothers and a couple brothers stepping in to shift the story to being sold, and now being sold to this really prominent gentleman named Potiphar. We're getting ready to see how even God was starting to move some of the pieces in place of what would come about. So, when we read in places like, we see how or we learn a little bit about Joseph's relationship with Potiphar. It wasn't just like he was distant there. In fact, Genesis 39:2 says, the Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. And so that's, I mean, not only was he there, but he's now moving up kind of in status with Potiphar. And really, despite all these circumstances, Joseph was starting to thrive. Like he's actually kind of growing. He's getting promoted. 3 times in this chapter, the author writes that God was actually with Joseph. Like it's very interesting. All these things are happening, and he's with him. And I think for many of us, how do you often feel like in some of your lowest moments? I'm curious, how do you tend to feel in relationship to God? You don't have to answer this now. Just like when you're in some of these moments of low, do you feel like he's with you? Or does that feel like that's just a distant idea? Do you just feel by yourself? Do you feel like, because I see Joseph, this man who's kind of trying to walk with God, trying to honor God, and in the midst of his circumstances, it's noted that God was with him. I think for many of us, it's easy to feel by ourselves. But even in the midst of these horrible circumstances, God has not left. There's still something happening. And so in the midst of that, he's blessed Potiphar because Joseph is there. He's been blessed the entire home of Potiphar because Joseph is there. So really, it's interesting because despite all these injustices Joseph has suffered and continue to suffer, God was still with him, righting wrongs and fighting for justice for Joseph. Well, there's several things that kind of take place because there's some highs and there's some more lows that happen as he interacts with a cupbearer in one of the king's cupbearers, actually, because eventually Joseph will go from Potiphar's house, he'll get put in jail. So it's like, yay! No, not good. So then he's in jail, and then he comes out of jail years later after you would think he would have moved out of there faster. But you fast forward through all of Joseph's story over the years, there's so many more instances, I'm struggling to speak English, of Joseph and all the injustice that he faces. But every time Joseph suffered, God comes through. There's something where you see him moving. Well, it culminates here in Genesis 41, and Pharaoh says to his servants, can we find a man like this? If there's a moment where Pharaoh gets to interact with Joseph, and we see there's something different. Like Pharaoh sees there's something different about Joseph. Because Joseph's been consistent throughout the whole deal. Throughout all of his circumstances, he's remained true. And Pharaoh said to the servants, can we find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of God? And then he looks at him and says, you shall be over my house, and all my people shall order themselves as you command. Only as regards to the throne will I be greater than you. So what just happened? Like, someone help me. What just happened? What did he just get? So like a step below the throne, he just was given all power and authority. All right, so just, you track with this. You're going, okay, thrown in a pit, pulled out, thrown in slavery, uh, put in charge of a home as kind of a lead slave. Things seem to be moving better. Thrown in jail, then comes forward in a moment now where he is put in all responsibility over Egypt. Well, part of what happens in this story, for many of you, many of you may be familiar, less familiar, but what happens is now he's in charge, really, of keeping up with what's known as like all the storehouses, like where all the food. And so one of the dreams Joseph actually has is related to that. There's going to be all this feast, like there's going to be years of all, like lots of growth and crops, and then there's going to be several years of famine. And so Pharaoh puts him in charge of all that. It's like, well, you need to manage all that. And so Joseph really is, he's in charge of food distribution to all the people. And so it's like 10 years later, as we move forward and famine has hit, well, whose family do you think it's also affected? Yeah, it's affected Joseph's family. And now we get face to face with, I'm thinking if I was a fly on the wall, like this would have been like the most awkward moment of all get out. But I would have loved to have been there. Like this would have been the best like live TV, like tuning in, best rose ceremony ever kind of mess. All right, so here is Joseph is sitting in his position, in his place where he's handing out all this food, and he looks up and he recognizes his brothers walking in, but they don't recognize him. All right, I'm just curious. Let's just be honest. What do you do? You've got all. I mean, you just remember all that you just went through the previous years, and you remember now what they did to you. What do you do? Huh? You like, I'm gonna give you the bad stuff. I'm gonna give you the moldy food. I'll give you off-brand. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, there's like, yeah, because let's be honest. There's like one of my favorite cereals. I don't really eat this a whole lot anymore. Is Fruity Pebbles. Um, like a good Fruity Pebble and a Dino Bite is not quite the same. Y'all know what I'm saying? Yeah. All right. So when you're handling all the food, this is life and death. I'm moving along here. All right. So Joseph is there, and so yeah, he has this moment. He could crush them. He has the power to absolutely just pay back of all payback. And he reveals himself to his brothers, that he's the brother. And the brothers just plead with him. Like, they're pleading with him for food before they even know it's him. And once they see him, they're just overwhelmed, and you can imagine probably how fearful they are. But in verse 3 of Genesis, let's see, I think we're 41, and Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. And here's his question: is my father still alive? But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. They're just overwhelmed. They just like, you're standing here. We thought you were gone. So Joseph said to his brothers, come near to me, please. And they came near, and he said, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. Here it is, guys. Amen. I couldn't have cued that any better. All right. So, all right. For God sent me before you to preserve life. Joseph's going, hey, it's okay, guys, because I recognize something. God sent me here to preserve life. You think about, he's talking about, I'm responsible for all this food and making sure people are fed and that people are living. And for the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are yet 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here. All right, get this. This is pretty significant. Joseph goes, hey, you guys think you're the one who sent me here. You didn't send me here. Like, God allowed me to be here. He says, but God, he has made me a father to Pharaoh and lord over all his house and ruler over all the land of Egypt. It's very interesting. That's pretty. If anybody else says that, it is absolute ludicrous. They are thrown out of any position probably they have today if they go, yeah, all those injustice things, like God allowed that to happen. But Joseph sits here and says, no, in the midst of all this, I see God's hand in this. But it doesn't take away from the fact that all those decisions were still very unjust. Like, that the decisions that those brothers made, the decisions that went against him in jail, but God was still, through those things, was still working out a plan for his good and ultimately something that would bring him to this moment. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father of Pharaoh and lord of all his house and ruler over all the land of Egypt. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. I'm curious, Joseph had that moment in that dream where he's thinking about, God, I just have to imagine, like, God, you're going to do something big one day. My brothers are going to be bowing down to me. But he had no idea how significant it actually would be and how God was going to use him in those places. I want to say this to you guys. I believe of any generation right now, this generation has some of the most significant opportunities to make an impact in our world. Literally in our world. And I think about those moments myself, when I even on that mountaintop kind of thing going, God, I feel like it's something significant. I feel like it's something big. And for you, I hope you feel some of those things. I hope you have some of those moments. But I would guarantee this. Whatever you think it is, I think it's even bigger. I think it's even more significant. But one of the things God's going to do, I think, through us is help shape what is significant. Because it was not Joseph's name being made much that was significant. It was God being on display through this story that is the most significant part of why we remember this. And as we think about those moments of how is God going to move in and work through what he's trying to do through our life, I can't help but think this. As I stood on that mountain, maybe for some of you seniors getting ready to graduate, some of you others that are just a few years away, I think there's one thing about our generation right now, too, though, we've got to be careful of. We live in a little bit in a place where what we see, we think that we can get it right now. We think that there's no reason why it can't happen right now. And one of the things that we see God do in this with Joseph, everything that was happening, God was preparing him for something. For many of us, we want to move to that next step of something. We want to become that thing that God's calling us to be, but it looks a lot like work. It often looks a lot like God trying to teach us things along the way and giving us opportunities. For many of you, some of the best things that you will do is try something and fail. You will step out and give your all in something, and it won't work. Some of the best things that you can do is give everything you have towards something and it not work, and you learn, and you get back up, and you continue on. And God's going to continue to grow you in and through some of those places. I think about a moment for our family. This was the year we had moved from Kentucky here. It was we were living here. We've been here for about 3 weeks, and we'd moved here to plant Journey Church. And for us, this has been the dream. This had been like the thing for years that we felt like God was calling us to. And there was no building. There was just a few families at this moment. In fact, our family, we moved on January 1st, and like a month and a half later, the Brownings moved down. And I'll never forget, I had just secured a job working over at Bosch. And was working there just in a temp kind of role, but it was enough to get like our family in a position to where it looked like we could try to get a home up in the Knightsville area of Somerville. And I felt like, man, things are like coming together. Like things are moving and kind of coming together. And I'll never forget the phone call. I'm pumping gas up in Somerville at a gas station. I get a phone call from the guy who's kind of over the area I'm working. And he said, Clay, hey, just want to let you, it's like a Thursday, just want to let you know, Oh, no, it's a Friday. Supposed to come in and do some work on Saturday. Don't need to come in on Saturday. I was like, oh, okay, well, cool. Like I get a weekend. And he said, I was like, all right, well, I'll just report back in on Monday, right? He said, well, no, actually, right now we're going to shut down that part of the plant, and but we'll call you if anything comes back up. And we had just signed on our house, like to move forward with the house, and I'm like, oh, okay. And hang up the phone. I'll never forget pumping gas, and I finished pumping. I'm like, ooh, I better stop pumping gas. Like, and and I and I'm getting in the car, and I remember calling my wife, Erin. Eliana's like 1 year old, and yeah, you don't remember this, good. Um, and I call my wife, and I can hear like where there was a thunderstorm happening, and I can hear you in the background crying, and she's just like, when are you coming home? Oh my goodness, like the power has now gone out. Can you swing by and grab food? It's just like it was just pandemonium, and I pulled up. My stepmother had come to visit us, and I'm parked. I pull up, and she calls me in distress because her windows were down and they wouldn't go back up, and it's pouring rain. I'm at my dad's place, and I get out the car. I'm trying to think, how am I going to like share all this information of like what's just happened, feeling the weight of all this, and and now it's raining in this car, and I run over and grab a tarp from my dad's barn. I come running out and I throw it over the car, and I'm like, all right, that'll take care of it. Then the wind blows, and it's like it blows off. I'm like, ah! So I run and I grab the tarp and I get it down, and he has like these cinder blocks off on the edge of the woods, and so I'm like running to grab the cinder blocks, and I grab them, and I'm coming back, and it is pouring rain, and I fall, like, and I just fall, and I'm just like mud all over me, and I'll never forget just laying there, just going, this is it. Like, this is what you called me to. And just feeling a pity party of like, are you kidding me? Like, I said yes. Like I said, I would go. I said I'd go do these things and be a part of this. And like, and just I'm trusting you, and I've trusted you, and this just can't like. And I'll never forget in that moment, like just a peace of God, just to go, Clay, I'm doing something. Just let me work. Let me work. And I didn't know all those things were, and for some of them I still don't quite understand all. I don't really, I'd be lying if I said, and then I figured it all out. That didn't happen. But I knew that God was doing something. It was a moment for me to go, okay, Clay, I did call you here, but are you going to trust me on some of these next steps? And the job that I eventually would get was amazing for the years I was here, that I was able to work there, and the people that God put in our paths, and the place and where we were looking to move, we ended up not moving there, moved somewhere else. And the neighbors God put around us, we got to see some of them come to know the Lord, and all those sort of things that were in the midst of that situation just seemed like makes no absolute sense of what's going on and why this would come together like this. That's just a piece of my story, but for you, I don't know what's coming next. But you have a choice, though, in the midst of that to trust and believe that in the midst of maybe some things that have happened to you, maybe some things that are coming your way, that God's not absent, and that he's working even through unjust moments to trust that he is still just. He is still good. You can still trust him in the midst of whatever it is. As we think about Joseph, often we think about maybe what someone has done to you. But as we close here, I want to ask you this. What maybe have you done? Like I got a little taller. What have you done to someone else? Maybe what has taken place, maybe some of your choices where you have caused and inflicted that on someone else. God's actually still good enough for that too. He's good and gracious to forgive. He's enough for you in the midst of your struggle, and he's enough in the midst of your sin. And tonight, as we get ready to close up, he is still gracious and good to us. And our encouragement here, and I love that this continues to be the message here at JSM, is that opportunity of relationship, of trust in Christ. And so y'all are off the wall, man. but I do mean this. For any of you guys, continue to encourage you in your relationships with Christ. Some of the best things you can do is encourage each other, though, as well. If you guys have any questions about what it looks like to trust Christ as we get ready to break up into our groups, spending some time talking with your group leaders there, I just want to encourage you there to do that. Maybe share some of those places you can trust God and believe that He's enough and He is faithful, even in the midst of what you've got going on and what stories are happening in front of you. So let me pray for us as we get ready to wrap up. God, I thank you for tonight. I thank you for your word. Lord, I thank you for Joseph. God, there's so many stories we look at Scripture that are just, or folks that, or just full of folks who made poor choices. It gives us some hope. And God, tonight, what we're just reminded that in the midst of some really sour situations, unjust situations, God, you're good. You're still good, and you're working those things out. So tonight, Lord, I pray for our students. I pray for our leaders, and myself included, God, that the things that you're trying to grow us through, God, some of them might take time, and some of them might feel a little bit like pain in the moments. Lord, as you are shaping us and bringing us to the people you want us to be. God, we thank you. We love you. We praise things in your name. Amen.